Yeah, did I mention that I'm opinionated? So
Yeah.
let me start with Doron for anybody who is still skeptical that
Yeah.
on 10/7 there were thousands of Hamas members who stormed Israel and committed the worst atrocities you could imagine. Oh, and there were thousands of non-Hamas innocent civilians who took part in the festivities, who
Yeah.
took part in massacring people, raping people, dismembering people, burning their houses down. These were the good people of Gaza. So the suicidal empathy that we're seeing, which is rooting for the guy who wants to kill you, is an outshoot of a far left segment of the population that has been programmed to hate no one and accept everyone. Here's the irony. Well, let's go beyond that, Doron. All Western law comes from Judeo-Christian values. First of all, it starts with the golden rule, which sounds like this fun thing that you might hear in a children's fairy tale. The golden rule comes from the Torah, right? Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. This is a biblical, so you could say Judeo-Christian, it comes from the Torah, but this is a biblical concept. I know it's repeated in the Christian Bible, but that is where it originated. And we have the 10 Commandments, which basically is the basis of almost all law. Now, here's the thing. We are being programmed. I am not a conspiracist, but whether it's intentional by the really dark forces in the world or it's just a byproduct, we are being programmed by AI to not think for ourselves. I remember many years ago when MapQuest came out. I don't even know if most people remember MapQuest. This was like the first mapping app when, so you could drive with it or whatever. And somebody had written an article about how this is dangerous because people aren't using that part of the brain that solves how do I get from point A to point B.
Folks, welcome to another podcast. Today we have a wonderful guest, Shana Meyerson. She is from Los Angeles, and her background is being a yoga expert, right? The field that I have nothing in common with and background in. And so we actually met when Shana reached out to me during the war and wanted to have an Israeli soldier on her podcast to talk about the war and so on, which I found it to be a very interesting mix there. But it turned out that we actually had way more in common than we knew, or at least I knew in the beginning off the bat. And so in any case, her background, like I said, is in yoga. She is a world-renowned creator of YOGAthletica, and she also has a program called Mini Yogis, Yoga for Kids. So very involved in that. Also, she is into Israel diplomacy. She's been involved with the AIPAC movement, the World Jewish Congress, and Jewish Democratic Corps, the Israel Bonds, National Women's Board, and a whole slew of different advocacy groups. Plus, she, since October 7th, has actually put her whole business and whole career aside to advocate for Israel and to counter the online information war that has basically been demonizing Israel and all of this mess that we have seen online. And so thanks to Shana, we actually have been able to also collaborate on a few other things, one of which is just recently we made a big stir, it turns out, from our meeting with the U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee here in Jerusalem. Both Shana and I had the privilege to help support the Christian voice in Israel and to help the Christian community to have a better representation for them and to be a better part of Israeli society and not have any of the social underprivileges or what have you as a underrepresented group in the state of Israel. So that created a little bit of a stir, and we might talk about that here on the podcast. But we also have a mutual friend, Andrew Fox. He is a former military professional from England, and Shana has a podcast with him that you guys, I highly recommend listening to. It's called A Paratrooper and a Yogi Walk into a Bar podcast. And so again, we'll have all the links to the social media platforms and everything that Shana does, because she does a ton of stuff online. And any case, so that right there is a small background of yourself. Can you give the audience here an understanding of how on earth, kind of like your podcast with Andrew Fox, it's kind of, comical, but it's also almost comical that we, like I pointed out, we got connected because we have nothing in common. But I'm actually very grateful that you reached out to me those many months ago to be a guest on your podcast. Explain, how did you get into my world, so to speak, of Israel advocacy?
So thank you so much, Doron, first of all, for having me on the show. It was amazing to have you on the Yoga for podcast. And when I approached you at our Huckabee meeting and said, hey, would you like to have a discussion on yours? And you said, yes. I'm like, really? Okay, great.
Exactly.
This is just tremendous. You've had such an amazing list of guests, and I'm really honored to be here. How did I wind up here? So first of all, I think that if you listen to Dan Senior these days, the one thing he says over and over and over and over again is, if you want to fight the anti-Semitism, you need to raise proud Jewish children, right? And I'm the poster girl. So I, first of all, grew up in a very, very, very Zionist family. Okay, here in America, I've always been an American. My mother remembers the founding of the state of Israel, and she was 4. Okay, so like that's how ingrained it is in who we are. I went to a preschool that was Zionist. I went to, kindergarten. I went to elementary school. I read the Torah as a child. And so when I was brought up never questioning who I was and never questioning the pride in who I was. So it wasn't a big leap that I would grow up to be a Jewish and pro-Israel activist. The thing that actually started me on this path, to be honest, was the advocacy. So I went to Cornell, which is now an absolute cesspool of anti-Semitism. It wasn't back then. In fact, it was heavily Jewish and very heavily influenced by the Jewish community. My senior year, there was a man named Bradley Smith. I still remember it after all these years, his name. And he took out a full-page advertorial in the Cornell Daily Sun denying the Holocaust. Now, an advertorial looks like a real article, right? It's like a paid article. And I had never seen Holocaust denial before. This is 1992, right? And I was young, I was naive. I was like, what is this? And so there was a big, a demonstration against the fact that not only was this published, but the Cornell Daily Sun took money, right, for him to publish this. I had never encountered real life anti-Semitism or disinformation or anything until that moment. And my mom, to this day, she's like, you called me that day and said that you wanted to be a lawyer to defend the Jewish people. I was in school at the time for law, so don't laugh. Yes, I teach.
I'm sorry. I love lawyers.
You could laugh.
Especially when I need them.
Yeah. No, I mean, don't laugh that I was pre-law at an Ivy League school, straight A student. Then I went to business school at UCLA, and I wound up teaching yoga. I mean, that's how it happens, right? But honestly, Israel advocacy has always been in my blood. And I do want to correct one thing. When you said that I'm in the Democratic Corps, it's the diplomatic corps. Now, why is this
I think I was trying to say diplomatic, but again, that's my dyslexia. I'm bad.
That's okay. The reason
Did I say Democrat?
The reason why this is important is because I am so far from the Democrats. I have never associated necessarily with the Republicans. I became independent about a year into Obama's presidency when I realized how anti-Israel and anti-Semitic he really was. And I'm like, okay, done with the Democrats. I
registered. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting because I think a lot of Jewish people, even in Israel, thought that Obama was actually an okay guy, so to speak.
they're
Like
not
because
paying
he,
attention.
yeah, because he kind of polished up his, yeah, exactly. Because he kind of polished up his way of how he spited Israel. Like it was a very polished kind of way, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't so in your face. And but yeah, I mean, I was aware of the things. In fact, we still suffer from a lot of the policies that he put into and implemented during his
Hmm.
presidency that have put us and led us to a lot of the big messes that we ended up with here with our wars and in general defending ourselves against Islamic extremists in the region. But that's interesting. You saw that, and so you're very different. You're different than many of the Jewish community in America. I guess many, because it seems to be. Maybe I'm wrong. You can educate me on this. But this is what I keep hearing. The reject on this side is people that keep giving us this claim. They're like, well, why is it so many from your community, being the Jewish community, are supporting the far left in America and all this stuff? And you obviously do not fit in that category from what I'm hearing from you, which is pretty
Right.
cool to hear. You know,
Well,
because you can
here,
actually speak to that, right? I mean, because you
yeah.
grew up in that, and I would love for people to try to understand that, because I think, yeah, I mean, I think that you know people don't realize how the Jewish community in America and the Jewish community in Israel are not one and the same, like a lot of people just assume.
I think the challenge, Joanne, is that in Israel, you correct me if I'm wrong, the political divisions are going to be more about, am I a hawk or a dove, right? So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
meaning that your political terms are very closely tied in with military reality, right?
Yes.
After October
Yes.
7th, almost everyone in Israel moved to the right? For
Yeah.
obvious reasons.
Correct.
In
Correct.
America, we don't have military um, we don't have like the military in our forefront for obvious reasons. We don't have terrorists on all our borders. We've had one attack on our soil. It was horrifying, but it was one. We're safe. We're separated
One
by
major
ocean.
attack. You've had a few, but you've had one
Sure,
major actually. But yes,
sure. But I
for
don't
those who
wake
want to
up
split hairs out there on a statement you just made.
Thank you. But I don't wake up every day wondering if today is going to be my last day because I'm so close
Mm-hmm.
to the Mexican border, right? Like
Exactly.
we've got things
Exactly.
under control. So in America, we're not. I mean, are there doves and hawks? Absolutely. But those are a subset, really, of the real division, which is where do you stand on social justice issues? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's how people choose political parties in America, which is why I don't consider myself a Republican. I'm a registered independent. I always consider myself a Democrat because I do believe in all the things, right? I believe in equal rights and I believe in taking care of the poor. And I think all the things, right? I want a better world for everyone, for
Mm-hmm.
every single person. I believe I, I have very mixed feelings about gun control. I can see both sides of almost literally every argument other than Israel. I only see one side. Um, I believe no one should have guns, though. I
Yeah.
believe we shouldn't even have toy guns. Like, that's what I believe about guns. But I
All right.
understand since
Now
we
this
do have
conversation's over.
guns. Sorry, I think your internet went out. Oh,
I said, now
that
this
because
conversation.
we,
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. This conversation's over.
yeah, well, hold on. I believe that because we do have guns, everyone should be able to have guns.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but I believe like a
You're saying
world where
in a
people,
utopic perfect world,
exactly.
you're persuaded more towards and leaning more towards that it would be a better world if we didn't have weapons. Yeah.
Exactly. If we only had like water balloons, I think like the world would be a better place. So that being said,
Yeah.
Doron, let's talk
Yeah.
about like why am I different from let's say the Jewish community? It's
Mm-hmm.
because I believe in most of the causes that they believe in, right?
Yeah. Right.
Jews have always, it's in the Torah, right? We stand up for humanity. That's who
Mm-hmm.
we are. We are the light upon the nations. We do believe in tikkun olam, but we're tikkun olaming ourselves to death.
Yeah.
So,
Explain tikkun
so
olam to the rest of the audience. I have no clue what you just said.
yes. Tikkun Olam means to heal the world. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds nice. It sounds like very Michael Jackson-y, like we could sway and we could sing, like Tikkun Olam, right?
Right,
It's the
right.
Jewish kumbaya. But the problem is that it's gotten to the point where so many Jewish people, they've become, as Gad Saad says, suicidally empathetic. Right? They care so much about the world around them that they put everything about Jewish people last. So that being said, why am I so different from the Jewish community? Because so much of the Jewish community has entrenched themselves in this Tikkun Olam, which, by the way, in synagogues in America, particularly, probably not as much in the Orthodox, if at all, but in the Reform and conservative movements, it's always Tikkun Olam, Tikkun Olam. So it's, right? And it's interesting because in the Torah, it actually says that you're supposed to heal first you, then your family, then your neighborhood, your country, right? Like it goes out in concentric circles, just like a stone in a pond, right? That the ripples are going to go out. So anyway, for me, for my upbringing, for what I've seen, and honestly, for my disgust in the social justice world that I used to think I was a part of, for all those reasons, I am like who I am today, standing up for what I believe in, which is Israel and the Jewish people.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to let the audience know, I mean, technically, like we have a lot in common, but we also have a lot of things that we completely disagree on. And that's the beauty, for me at least, of this podcast. Not everybody I bring onto this podcast is because I want people, like an echo chamber. I want people to make me feel good about my political views and my this and my that, right? But at the same time, what I think is, fun here is, and this is, I think, also like hopefully a good social experiment for a lot of people out there. If I'm able to put aside my differences and have Muslims on here, have Druze on here, have Christians on here, have you on here, and all the different wonderful characters that have been on this show, and each one is an incredible person with wonderful life story, etc. And we're able to come to terms, I guess you could say, or a lot of things that we've kind of agreed on certain subjects is the Israel issue. And that I think is very, I find that very interesting. You know what I mean? I find that very interesting that it doesn't mean that we all come from the same batch of like political spectrum or whatever. And what I've noticed, I think, is what it is too, is just having some common sense. If you have some common sense and quit clumping into your social, feel good network of these are my people and I don't discuss anything with anyone else. I think that's ignorant. I think that's really ignorant. It's very divisive. And you brought some very powerful points here, because you're saying like, look, I agree on a lot of the, the social issues with the Democratic Party and so on and so forth. But in contrast to, let's say, the Republican Party, you're not into the whole gun rights thing and so on and pushing that hard. And then I know a lot of people are now pulling their hair out and going, oh my gosh, I can't believe she just said that. And I'm like, guys, but notice also, unlike most of the Jewish community, again, I'm probably saying this wrong, but a lot of the Jewish community in America, they are not necessarily pro-Israel per se, at least not in the same way that you've been advocating and you've been using your platform. And I know also that it's not popular for people that are into the yoga world either, to stand on the side of the bad Israel guys, you know what I mean? The bad guys that have been, pummeling the Palestinians for 2 years. So can you explain that dynamic and why is it that, you're able to kind of separate yourself from these social cliques that make us feel good, so to speak?
Well, first of all, I want to add that when you say common sense, I'd like to add to that common decency. Okay, because if people have common decency, there's not a single person on earth who has a shred of decency who could look at what happened on October 7th and not justify Israel's response. So there's
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the reasons why I'm seen as such an iconoclast and so separate from what people expect from me, right? In peace, love, and happiness. And I do want to clarify.
Yeah.
I believe in guns. I've thought about getting a gun, other than the fact that you've never
What?
seen anybody worse in. I have. I'm just really bad in emergency situations, and I don't think that would end well. No, what I'm saying is that I hate the theory of guns. But guns don't kill people. People kill people. I don't mean to sound like a billboard, but it's true. And I 100% believe it.
Yes.
And I believe that we need guns. I feel comfortable when I walk into my shul and there's two guys in front with guns. But at the same time, I feel sick that they have to be there. Right?
Right.
So,
and see, that's a rational explanation from your anti-gun side of the spectrum, right? And to me, that makes sense. That's a rational argument, right? And guess what? I'm the guy who's going to be more pro-gun in my worldview, but I'm also the guy who's going to say, I really wish we didn't have to have guns.
right.
I do wish that as well, right? And there you go. We found common ground, but it's like immediately when people have those two different perspectives per se, we just want to like instantly end the conversation. And I think that's dumb. And hopefully people are able to listen to our conversation and realize, look, that's how you have a civil conversation on these issues.
Yes. I actually, the way you stated it, exactly how I feel about guns. So we actually have no difference there. I was just saying I prefer water balloons. But I mean, when it comes, just as long as there's sort of warm water, the cold water.
Right.
But when we talk about, like different people, like, so that was sort of the joke, right? Every joke starts with a rabbi and a priest walk into a bar. So we've got with Andrew, my show with Andrew, a paratrooper and a yogi walk into a bar. But very much like our whole thing is like, we're not trying to be sensational. We're just trying to be seen. We do not agree on everything. And as you said, we come from, completely different worlds, right?
Yes.
He comes from the paratrooping world. I come from the, sitting on a yoga mat and saying, "Oh, world," right? So, what do we have in common at a bar? Again, we have common decency, and that's what it comes down to. Now, why do I depart so far from so many of the? First of all, because I've not only left the left, I'm so far to the right now that I think I'm further right than just about any American I know who's not my father. And 10-7 pushed me there. It's not that I haven't been aware of all of this all the way back. I mean, this disinformation campaign, this has been going on at least since 2014 when the internet went crazy with social media, but also all the way back in 2009. We were already seeing this. I'm not saying this by looking back and in researching this. I was the victim of it. This has always been a problem in the left. But Doron, most people in this world are afraid to speak up against what they view as the majority. And right now, the minority and the very, very loud minority has sort of positioned themselves as the majority. And anybody who's not paying attention believes that if you want to be accepted in this society, you need to defend terrorists. Right. I don't buy that. Like, I have a very, very, very high moral bar, not just on this, but in everything in my life. I live a life always of integrity. That's actually part of yoga is that you always have to live in integrity and mindfulness. I'm true to who I am. And Doron, yes, I have given up my career to defend Israel, but I can't not do it. Because in my heart, when I see an injustice as blatant and as vehement and as violent and as vicious as what's going on right now against the state of Israel, the land of my soul, I don't have a choice. I, as Shana Meyerson, don't have a choice. Other people have the choice, and they've chosen to either stay silent or just go ahead and march along with the masses because it makes them feel good about themselves. It makes them feel cool. It makes them feel accepted. It makes them feel safe. whatever the reason, I don't have those reasons. All I have is my integrity.
Mm. And you know, that also combined with a certain level of courage, because I think today, you know, like people say, you know, wow, that's really courageous, you know, to go fight in a war, right? To
Mm-hmm.
be honest, it isn't. You're defending what's most important to you, and you're with a, you know, a group of war fighters that are all, you know, we're all here in it together, right? What I think is takes more courage right now in the day that we live in is to be able to break away, like I was pointing out earlier a little bit and alluding to, is these social cliques, however you want to call it, and what I hope people understand is you're being played by the algorithms online, by the social media giants, if it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, and you're being actually socially engineered to actually be more divisive. You are socially engineered to be more anti the other, and the very opposite of what you just said, having, you know, respect for others and treating others like you would like to be treated, right? And your honor and so on. It's like people have lost all sense of decency, and I see that as a fruit of post the COVID period, because that's where I saw that super shift. Because after COVID, mostly my American friends that I know are like, no, I can't go to have Thanksgiving with my family anymore because I'm like, because what? Well, because, you know, they were pro, we were against, or vice versa. And it's like all of a sudden social issues became so explosive. It's like, you're telling me as a family you can't get together? So I'm not shocked when, as a society, we can't be civil and having common sense on some basic issues, and people are just getting really bent out of shape. Are you is that some of what you might have experienced? And that really, to me, I see it as you have to have courage to be able to say, no, I'm not going to go with the flow, I'm not going to go with everybody's dumb opinion and dumb way of acting, and keeping that moral standard within those pressures from all directions.
Listen, Doron, you say it doesn't take courage to fight in a kinetic war. First of all, I'm going to argue that we're in a war of words right now, and it
Yeah,
not you and I, but we are.
right, what we're
There's very
seeing.
many parallels to this. I again, like, I'm not saying this to be humble or anything. I don't see this as courageous at all. I just see this again as integrity. I don't think
Mhm.
integrity is courageous. I think that it's an ideal that we all need to strive for, and that we all should be standing up for what is good and right in this world. We are literally talking about a war of good versus evil. Where is the courage in standing up for good? I
Yeah.
mean, it's a sick paradigm that we have tripped ourselves into. Now, to answer your question, when you say that people did not want to have Thanksgiving with their families, Doan, it goes beyond that. We have families members that don't talk to each other anymore because of their political differences. I don't want to name the people, you know, in my broader family, not in my immediate nuclear family, my brothers, my sisters, my parents, but cousins, aunts, uncles that are on opposite sides of the spectrum. Not the spectrum, by the way, the political spectrum. When you work with kids, you have to be clear about which spectrum you're
Right.
talking about. Who literally don't talk to each other. I mean, I have an uncle who I love. He is funny. He is affable. He has always been like my favorite uncle. And he is as far left as, like, literally, like, imagine how far left you could imagine and then just go further left. And you know, he writes some things on my Facebook page that I think are, you know, accusatory and inappropriate, about the Israel conflict and blah blah blah. And so I had sent him a birthday note just saying, you know, dear Uncle so and so, I just want you to know that even though we don't, you know, see the world the same way, I still, you know, I love you. I consider you to be, you know, still, you know, very dear to my heart. And there's nothing that politically could get in the way of how I feel about you as an uncle. And his reply was something, I don't even remember. Either he didn't reply or replied in 2 words. And then the next day he was already posting mean things on my Facebook again. And I'm like, honestly? But beyond that, I've lost almost every single one of my friends. Literally, I exaggerate not, including some of my best friends in the entire world, because I cannot, in good conscience, be friends who don't understand the moral implications of this moment. And if they cannot stand against anti-Semitism, and if they cannot stand for Israel, then they can't stand for what's good and kind in the world. Then I share nothing in common with these people, including one of my best friends that I have been best and closest friends with since I met him in 1993. And it's game over between us because of this war.
Wow. Well, you know, one of my favorite quotes is by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. For those who don't know, Google him. He's actually a giant within the Christian world. And he lived during the Nazi occupation and takeover of the war and everything. He was a German himself, and or German pastor, right? And so his denomination went along with the Germans, with the Nazis, rather, with the Germans, sorry, with the Nazi ideology, and did not oppose it. But he did, and he got imprisoned for it. And then days before the war was over, just to spite him, they sent him out and executed him, right, with a bunch of other political prisoners. So this man died for his stand against the Nazis, and he didn't have to, right? He wasn't Jewish. He's like, hey, leave me alone, right? I'm just a pastor, and just be silent, just be quiet. Don't make a fuss. And one of the most powerful quotes, and encourages me for today, comes from him, because I think this is really what it's about. And this is why I think takes courage, is to do this and to do what he did. And he said, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. And for me, people like yourself that have had the pressures from all over to be silent, to be the good Jew that just doesn't stir things up, right? Rock the boat. The Galut Jew, as I call them, Jews that live in the Galut, which is in the diaspora, have this mindset of just assimilate, just keep your head down. It's very different than the Israeli Jew, and the Israelis like myself and others that grew up here as Tzabals. We're not apologetic about who we are. And that's something right. You said in the very beginning that was very beautiful, is raising up children that are not apologetic about who they are, that are proud of who they are, strong in their identity. But it also means that as in the hour we live in, you will have to speak. You can't be silent. You can't just ride, as a spectator, right along the side of what's happening and just ignore all this rhetoric that's coming against the Jewish people, that's coming against Christian Zionists or pro-Israel Christians or what have you. How do you, how can you give people tools to do like with yourself? Because like, how do you manage with that? You know what I mean? Because you just said like you've lost all of your closest friends, yet you manage to keep your compass, right? To keep that your true north, so to speak, in your purpose and in your dignity of what you believe in, and not compromising that, even to the extent that you've actually lost close friends, and obviously have had some clashes with your own family on that.
Well, first of all, one thing we can also get into is I didn't just lose all my friends. I also lost my entire yoga community that I thought was my people. That includes all my students, my business. I actually didn't give up my career on purpose. It gave up on me. But we can talk about that later if we want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
but how do I maintain my moral compass when all these people have fallen out of my life? And the answer is I maintain my moral compass because these people have fallen out of my life. I don't need them confusing. Not that I'm somebody who just doesn't get confused by other people's opinions. I listen to them, but I'm a very opinionated person. I had an hour-long conversation with somebody the other day which I dominated about coffee, and I don't even drink coffee. So let's put this in perspective. But I do want to say that so tools. Communication is our greatest tool. And I also want to go on record as saying that I happen to be in not only one of the most prominent synagogues in America, Sinai Temple in Los Angeles, but we are the light upon the nation of America. I mean, we are 100% pro-Israel, I think, in my community. And oddly enough, so is my mother's congregation, which I grew up in, Shira Malo in Irvine, which is Reform. And the Reform movement, keep in mind, is the far left movement that generally has proven itself to be rabidly anti-Israel. There are literally anti-Israel synagogues, like in their charter. Yeah. In the Reform movement in America. But Shira Malo in Irvine is a beacon of Zionism. And the rabbi there, Rabbi Steinberg, like he is basically like, get on the ship or get off the ship. We are Zionists in this congregation. So I do want to say that the two congregations I am a part of are still bastions of hope for all things Israel. Now, the tools. So the reason why I started the Yoga of War podcast, which now I'm closing in on 100 episodes with many of the world's top luminaries, it's really been remarkable. When I started this show, I had a choice. I could either create my own channel on YouTube, or I could put it on my yoga channel, where the people, not who wanted to hear it, but who needed to hear it, would hear it. Now, I knew it would get a lot less exposure on my yoga channel, but I already had about 50,000 subscribers or whatever. So I figured, okay, I'll put it there. So that's one thing. Don't be afraid to speak up just because you think the people you're talking to don't want to hear it. I find it so thickly ironic that people are like, oh, well, if I'm in a conversation and people are saying anti-Israel stuff, like, I don't feel like it's my place to speak up. I'm like, well, why is it their place to speak up against Israel? Of course it's their place to speak up. And it's been hard, so I have been a content creation machine as far as a minimum of 2 podcasts a week, with one with Andrew, one with my Yoga of War. I write Substack once or twice a week. And by the way, it's funny what you said, because the name of my Substack is actually Unapologetically Jewish. And I am and I post constantly on Facebook, which seems weird because who uses Facebook anymore? And the answer is the older people who have forgotten how to teach their children to have morals and values. And they are also very afraid to speak up. Yeah. I mean, I have, 70-year-old women in, Chicago, who are afraid that somebody from Hamas is going to show up at their door if they post something for Israel. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So my whole mission was to provide the talking points for the people who just don't know what to say. Okay, all day long, people are DMing me and messaging me and saying, what do I say to this? What do I say to that? This person said this. And I'm like, that's fine. I've become the resource for the people who care. And also, I have changed some minds. I have had people who have been like, I had no idea. And by bringing on credible voices such as yours onto my show, instead of just ranting about my very opinionated opinions, it adds a level of credibility, right? I mean, this is how I met Andrew Fox, right? He came on my show because he had his first groundbreaking report in December 2024, which line by line debunked the Hamas statistics. And months later, they quietly said, oh, we had 13,000 errors. Thank you, Andrew Fox. And then he was on my show a second time. And then I asked him about, did he want to collaborate? And so he did. So again, and so the power of that show is, first of all, it's super casual conversation, unless the topic is extremely heavy. We're very, very just casual and chatty talking. So it's relatable, and it's relatable to, as you said, the people who like the military stuff, the people who like the softer stuff. I actually like to get into the military stuff with him, even though, as I said, I only play a military expert on TV. And he's the real one. But has many tools as I could put out there. I'm hoping to be the toolbox for the people who want to speak up. We need more people to speak up. We are fighting a war of words right now.
Yes, exactly. And, you made a statement earlier about the loud minority that are trying to pose as being the majority opinion. And I'm seeing that both on the left, the woke right, because it's in both camps. It's in both camps today. It used to be, unfortunately, mostly on the left. They were plagued with just, these, just outlandish, crazy people that just can't have a conversation. They can't articulate their issue that they're fighting for, and just be civil about it, right? But now that we're seeing that on the right, we're seeing that on the right. We see that with Tucker, with Candace, with Fuentes, with Andrew Tate, I guess, and I mean the list goes on. All these people that are absolute morons always have been, in my opinion, but then also people that just were absolute, awesome people and had great talking points and were, and we supported, and I agreed with on a lot of their issues, right? And supported them. And it's like, it's such a mess. But I think like you were saying, the courage is really recognizing that I'm not going to shut up while I let these people run their mouths on their rabid ideas, because it is what it is, and that your opinion matters. And even though you're not someone famous, you're not somebody on television or whatever, that you're a human being and you have common sense, God hoping, right? You have some common sense, right? And just exercising that, and for you to exercise your freedom, your right to speak and to make your opinion heard. I think, like what you said is absolutely right. Like, you're part of this conversation, and to just say, no, I'm not gonna, because I don't want to stir things up. Well, why do they have a right to talk their trash and their misinformation, and you can't throw in an opinion that you have, even if you don't have all the facts, because nobody has all the facts. What do you say to that? And basically combating, right, this phenomenon, because I think people need to understand that that's really what it boils down to. They don't control the narrative. The majority does. And I think the majority of people, both on the right or left, if you want, in America, Israel's got more colors, so to speak, politically speaking. But I think most of us actually have a lot more in common than we think we actually do.
Yeah. And in a sick way, in our extraordinarily divisive country and world that we live in, the one thing that the far left and the far right can agree on, literally the one thing, is anti-Semitism, the gift that keeps on giving. See how it has united the left and the right. Okay. This is sick and disturbing, but really, honestly, Doron, I would say that the answer is in the question. And the answer is that people need to educate themselves. I don't have all the facts, but I have a hell of a lot of facts. Why? Because I care about facts, and they're out there if you look for them, right? So many people have been just not only indoctrinated, but they're indoctrinated and they don't ask questions, right? They just accept everything that's poured into their brains. Here's the thing. We are being programmed. I'm not a conspiracist, but whether it's intentional by the really dark forces in the world, or it's just a byproduct. We are being programmed by AI to not think for ourselves. I remember many years ago when MapQuest came out. I don't even know like if most people remember MapQuest. This was like the first mapping app when, so you could drive with it or whatever. Mm-hmm. And somebody had written an article about how this is dangerous because people aren't using that part of the brain that solves how do I get from point A to point B. And it's true, like these days, like we're like, oh, you need me to go to the grocery store on the corner? Let me type it into my nav, right? Like we don't think anymore. So I'm not saying that like that is nefarious in and of itself. However, AI is absolutely training us to not think for ourselves, and whatever it feeds us is what we are meant to believe. What is it feeding us? Well, what is the dominant narrative on the internet? Because AI is just a conglomeration of everything that it finds on the internet, the lies that are called Wikipedia and BBC and New York Times, in CNN, in the United Nations, and all these credible sources that are blatantly anti-Semitic. What is AI doing? Is taking it all and saying, here it is in a nice little package. And I'm AI. I'm your friendly avatar. You would marry me if you could, wouldn't you? And some people do, particularly in Japan. And so people, and then they think they've done their due diligence, right? Because they go to the heavily biased Wikipedia page, or they get the paragraph of like, oh, make this into a paragraph from AI. But if anyone like cares about, that thing we used to call history that used to be relevant in this world instead of counterfactual lies and propaganda, if people want it, it's there. The problem is either because they're lazy or because they're so entrenched in their ideologies that, that's a very human reaction to never want to be wrong. We all do this. But I have to be honest, me as a person, I question my assumptions constantly because the other voices are so loud. Every day I'm like, is it possible? Is it possible that we are really the bad guys? And I think about it and I philosophize about it and I remind myself, and then I see the things from 10/7 that are still all over my X account that just crush my heart and my soul every single time I look. And I'm like, no, I know for a fact, this is the face of evil. What Hamas did and the Gazan people is pure evil. Hard stop.
Yeah.
Get some facts.
Yeah. In fact, you said something very on point there, what Hamas and the Gazan people did. I think a lot of times one of the biggest mistakes, and I do it as well, is that we separate the two entities like as if they're two different entities. And I've said this before in interviews that my experience while fighting in Gaza is that we couldn't find any innocence in Gaza. In other words, any bystanders, anyone that was like, hey, this isn't for me, and that's a sad reality that, first of all, it's the people of Gaza, which are Arabs. So the Arabs that living in Gaza that ended up in the circumstance of there's a whole history when I'm not going to get into it per se, but long story short, these are Arabs that come from the region. Most of them come from Egypt, etc. And they use the propaganda with the, first of all, claiming to be Palestinian, which is this fictitious name and, was created in the early 60s by propaganda war and whatnot, and as a way to beat Israel over the head, right? But they're not separate entities, right? Between these Arab people that live in Gaza and the Hamas organization, because they voted in Hamas. Hamas isn't some external ISIS, whatever group that came out of nowhere and invaded. These are Gazans. These are Arabs from within Gaza. They got elected and they chose to create a terrorist organization that has a charter that says from the river to the sea, we are going to wipe out all Jews. And that's from the Jordan River or from the nation of Jordan to the Mediterranean, meaning all of Israel. That's their charter. That's their mindset. That's their worldview. That's the Gazans. And I think that's a well spot on statement, the way you articulated it, because I wanted to highlight that because I think a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people miss that. What do you want to say about that that reality, and weigh in some ideas on that?
Yeah, did I mention that I'm opinionated? So let me let me start with Doron for anybody who is still skeptical that on 10/7 there were thousands of Hamas members who stormed Israel and committed the worst atrocities you could imagine. Oh, and there were thousands of non-Hamas innocent civilians who took part in the festivities, who took part in massacring people, raping people, dismembering people, burning their houses down. These were the good people of Gaza. So this was not just, but here's what I want to say, is that let's start connecting some dots here. Okay. So we started with you asking, why am I here? And it's because I've always been a Zionist. I've always been in Zionist schools. I've always been in a Zionist family. I've always known who I am. Okay. What did I learn growing up? I learned Am Yisrael Chai. We love, I mean, it means the nation of Israel lives, but what I mean is I learned to love the nation of Israel. That's what I learned. Okay. Let's talk about the innocent people in Gaza. What are they learning in their UNRWA schools now for how long is a generation? 20 years, right? So a full generation. What have they been learning in their UNRWA schools? UNRWA, by the way, being a terrorist organization. It's not just infiltrated. It is run by terrorists. Okay.
Correct.
The kids, are kids innocent? That's the first question. Yes, kids are innocent. However, when your kindergarten school play involves putting on your Hamas like that bandana and holding a fake AK-47 and then shooting literally fake Israeli soldiers and singing and cheering about it, like the same way that we would sing Am Yisrael Chai, which means we love our nation. They are literally raising their children on a mother's milk of massacre. So you said
it's a death cult. It's a death cult.
It's an absolute death cult. So who's innocent? Even the innocents have been completely indoctrinated. Now, you talked about the charter saying that from the river to the sea, right, will be Arab, Muslim, all the things. But that's a very sound. I know you know what it says, but I want to make sure people understand that is a very sanitized version of what this charter says. What it literally says is kill Jews wherever you could find them. Literally, if they're hiding behind a tree or a rock, kill them. Right? Like this is what the people of Gaza, and I'll argue the people within the PA, have also been brought up to believe. So, is the doctor who is not affiliated with Hamas, but happens to have a hostage in his closet, an innocent civilian? Well, I mean, you can make the call. Okay, that is why I don't believe that there actually are, not because I believe, I love Israel and therefore everyone against us is bad guys. But if you actually look at what is happening there, that is the truth about what is going on in Gaza. It's not an accident that, whatever, 1 and 2 or 3 houses has an entrance to a tunnel. You think they don't realize that there's an entrance to a terror tunnel in their child's bedroom? Like you think they just like bought the house and they're like, oh, you mean what?
Oh, look, there's this secret passage we didn't even know about.
Right? I mean, it's ludicrous.
How naive do you have to be to believe that? Yeah.
Well, is it naive, Doron? So this is the question we're all asking. Is it naive, or is it complicit?
Wow.
People want to believe what they want to believe. I mean, there's so much evidence that proves that everything that these, these anti-Israel, particularly on the left, people are shouting in the streets. And I do hope that we could get into that just dynamic because it's sick.
Yeah.
But there's a willful ignorance that goes along with these behaviors.
Yeah. So we'll get into that actually next. One thing I want to add though to your point about how you were raised, how they're raised, and I can tell you I've seen that firsthand. Like you can talk about it because you've done research, but you didn't grow up here, right? And people say, "Oh, what does she know?" Well, guess what? I grew up here, and I have seen the way I can confirm literally everything that you've just said because I've seen it. I've seen the way they raise their kids in propaganda. I've been part of Israeli police missions in East Jerusalem, where we've done some very hard missions that are almost equal to a military mission in a terrorist home, on drug busts and weapon seizures, etc. From these terrorist families. And it's very normal in their world to have this kind of worldview of, and these are Israelis, right? These are Israeli Arabs, mind you, but they're Muslim, and they support the jihadist Islamic worldview, and they support Hamas, and they have Hamas flags, or Fatah, or one of the other terrorist organizations. And I remember asking them, I said, like, I'll sit with these terrorists. I say, I mean, to me, they're terrorists, right? Just because I didn't arrest them in a police mission doesn't make them, you know what I mean? We think classically, oh, then that's a terrorist. And I'm like,
Sure.
and I sit down with these young men, and when I've had the opportunity, I said, listen, I'm just curious. You're throwing your whole life away here. You do realize. I said, like, I'm used to, like, in our homes, you'll have like a soccer banner of whatever soccer team that, we root for or whatever. Why do you have all this crap in your house? Why do you have this pro-terrorist crap in your house? Like, is it really worth it for you? No. And he's trying to say, no, it's nothing. It's nothing. I'm like, nothing? Really? That's your answer? And, and so they try to, like, just BS you basically, right?
Yeah.
But in contrast, like you're saying, but in contrast with the way you grew up is life. Well, again, you can say, well, that's Shana over there in California. Doron, what about the Israelis? You guys are so extreme. All those settler violence, which is a lot of misinformation online and false reporting from the news agencies. But in any case, we get taught the exact same thing. We got taught the exact same thing. Just the other day, I was on the border with one of the top reporters from the States, giving them a tour of Israel and tour of the Gaza Strip and everything. And we met some Israeli soldiers that I don't know from Adam, which is great because it's like, I didn't tell you what to say. Yeah. And this young soldier girl, she's a reservist, but I mean, she's relatively young. And she's sharing, after she showed us around and everything, that, I was in shock because all of a sudden she changed to telling her personal story. She says, they killed one of my good friends at the Nova Festival. And that's actually one of the reasons why I've made a commitment to do the reserve duty that I'm doing. Because technically she probably is in one of those categories that she wouldn't have to do reserve duty.
Right.
And so she's there because almost like a volunteer. And that's kind of what she wanted us to know. And after she told this horrible story of what happened to her friend, it was terrible. I look at the journalist and I said, now you listen very carefully and you watch. I said, young girl, I said, whatever her name was, I said, I said, do you wish the same on the Gazans as what happened to your friend?
Right.
What do you think she said, Shana?
100% no. 100% no. Jews don't wish those kinds of things upon anybody.
And mind you, I had no clue. I mean, she could have said, those bastards, I wish them the hottest place in hell, right? And she would be completely justified to say that, in my opinion. And I was like, brother, I said, let that be clear that is the huge difference between us. And that, just to overemphasize your point there about their their death cult. They're all about shedding blood and killing people for their cause, irregardless who it is. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's even their own people become the most that pay the highest price, actually, ironically, more than the targets they go after. And to me, that's even in a way the worst irony in this whole death cult reality that you're living in is you're becoming the number one victim of your own demise. Whereas on our side, it's all about life. And if people want to know why I've been fighting, why a lot of my friends have been fighting, your friends have been fighting, it's because we're protecting life. That's the difference. Plain and simple, end of argument. There's nothing to argue here. And if you want to argue, and this is for those listening that are pro the Pally group, if you're wanting to root for those people, this is what you're rooting for. Let it be clear. You're rooting for people that are all about death. It's a death cult. And you're shooting down those who are fighting for life. Am Yisrael Chai. And I think you said it perfectly. But let's talk about these people that are on the streets, like you were saying.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry, I wanted to stack on what you're saying, but I think you're going to
go for
right
it.
into that.
Sorry, go for it. Go for it.
I was going to talk about the people on the streets, so going back to willful blindness. It doesn't take much. You look at the Palestinian demonstrations, they're screaming, they're angry, they're calling for death to Jews and death to the IDF, and let's, and they're spreading all this hateful propaganda. You look at the Jewish demonstrations, and it's us waving Israeli flags and American flags and saying "Am Yisrael Chai." So again, it doesn't take a genius. It doesn't take a genius to know what you are. We are singing songs. They are screaming epithets for our death. There's nothing parallel. In Doron, it comes down to two words: Jewish values.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing that we spoke before about how you have a tendency to, you were saying, to speak too loudly. And I'm like, I get so excited. I'm actually turning red here.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, go on with your question.
I just wanted to be clear before we started, right? I was talking about how, because of my hearing that's gone down from all the explosions in Gaza and whatnot, and so I catch myself. It's usually the family that's afterwards. Was that a good conversation you were having? Was everything okay? And I'm like, what are you talking about? It was a great conversation. But yeah, and so elaborate on that, the Jewish values, right? Because this is what I'm seeing on the far right now. I don't know if I've seen it on the far left per se, although they have been saying similar rhetoric, but it's different. It has like a different kind of nastiness to it, if you like. But it's what I'm noticing on the elite. Let's now hit on the far right, because we've hit your political spectrum a lot here now, and just to be fair, let's get some balance. But really, this is what I'm seeing is a big problem, actually. Even I would say to a certain extent, even worse than the far left in a way, because the rhetoric is about America first, which sounds great, right? It's laced with something that sounds patriotic, right? You're like, who doesn't want to be America first? And it's to be but how do they get there? They throw Israel under the bus, the Jews under the bus, the Talmud. Let me tell you about the Talmud. Well, first of all, you're not pronouncing it right. We can start with that, bro. Number two is, don't try to talk to me about a book of legal dissertation and discussion. And here I'm with a lawyer, so you can even correct me. I'm like, look,
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. Let me go on record. I studied law in school.
Well, the thing is, in other words, you understand legal rhetoric better than I do, right? As a novice, and let's just say I got a traffic ticket. And I'm going to try to argue my case because I did some online study and I think I'm going to nail it because
Right.
I have it figured out. And then a lawyer is going to laugh at me if I have that conversation with a lawyer and say, you really don't want representation on this? You really don't want my expertise on this? You know, it's like, no, I got this. I got this. That's the kind of people that are pushing this anti-Semitic rhetoric, trying to discuss the Talmud of absolute ignorance. And of course, it's just to make anti-Semitic jabs, and it's all bunk. Is the one thing I see. The other thing is this: the Jews control everything. The Jews are into everything. So we're talking about Jewish values. Oh, there they go again. You talked about being a Zionist. Oh, here we go again. It's those Zionists. They're terrible people. You know, they're all about land grabbing and taking and stealing and blah blah. Let's try to make some clarity on this, would you?
Well, as you're saying this, I go back to what Douglas Murray says all the time, which is, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, and I'll tell you what it is that you're guilty of. It's all, yeah. It's all for it's brilliant, but it's all forced inversion, and we have to understand that this is, you know, anti-Semitism is nothing new. I hopefully everybody who's watching this show understands this basic concept that anti-Semitism, I mean, vile, vehement, violent, vicious anti-Semitism based all on lies and propaganda has existed since the first Jew, right? So we're talking about a 3,500-year-old cycle that just keeps recycling. Okay, so so all of these lies, the more ludicrous they get, right, the more they get recycled. Because if it's bigger, if it's bolder, if it's more shocking, and especially in this day and age of clickbait, it's like, oh yeah, let's take all their values and turn it against them, right?
Right.
So, and I also want to address this America First concept, because what these America First people don't realize is that America benefits a lot more from Israel than Israel does from America. Right now, Israel is working on achieving military independence because it sees the trajectory of our political system in both directions, and realizing that the alliance that we thought was ironclad it may not be here after just 3 more years when Trump leaves office. Okay. So Israel is ready to establish its independence. Now I have to say that lightly, because everybody's like, that's because, you know, Israel controls America and America controls it. I'm not saying it that way. I'm just saying that Israel needs to look out for itself. What does America get for its, let's say, approximately $3 to $4 billion investment in Israel? Now, keep in mind that when it gives $3 or $4 billion to Gaza, what they get out of it is Hamas gets to build more terror tunnels. I mean, that's the return on investment. Zero.
Correct.
It's money that has been literally thrown away. Go down the list of countries that get aid from America, and it's a pit. You just give it to them. They do what they want with it, good, bad, or indifferent. What happens when America gives whatever, $3 or $4 billion to Israel? Israel takes that money and spends it on American, what do you call it? Not aerospace. What do you call it?
Air defense systems.
Defense. And Israel, like, for example, who, no matter what Trump says, 100% created the Iron Dome that now America has also taken to create, you know, our up and coming Golden Dome. But Israel takes the technology that they've developed that is always light years ahead of the technology, military technology that anybody else has. And I'm just talking military right now. And they give their military technology secrets to America. Okay. So now America builds these systems. So the money that they invested, that seems to be invested in Israel, is actually invested in America. What happens? The companies that build this have to hire the people who build it, which creates all the economic downstream effects that way outweigh the $3 billion investment. And now America is the beneficiary of the most cutting edge military technology probably on Earth today, particularly when it comes to defense. Okay, that's one thing.
Correct.
What else do we get from Israel? First of all,
just mind you, just in that industry alone, we're looking at roughly 200,000 U.S. jobs.
Mm-hmm.
200,000 U.S. jobs. And we're not talking about 200,000 burger flippers at Wendy's. We're talking
Yes.
about 200,000 good paying jobs for top engineers, develop the whole list that goes on, project developers, whatever, etc. In other words, we're talking about billions of dollars,
That's
right?
right.
Of American opportunity. So
That's
does
right.
that sound like America first to anybody?
Right. So now America, just in dollar amounts, the aid that they
Yeah,
give to Israel comes back in dividends to America. Okay.
yeah,
Second, what would America or any Western country on earth do today without Israeli intelligence? Israeli intelligence is stopping terrorist attacks every single day across the globe, not just on Jews, right?
yeah,
On everybody. So everybody
correct.
knows. I mean, even people who hate Israel know that the Mossad are right the gold standard of intelligence. You could say that they're
Yeah,
up there with the CIA. That's fine. Whatever it is, America gains so much from this unlimited access to Israeli intelligence. Then, of course, we've got the water tech that has literally saved my state. My state of California has something like in the high 20s of independent contracts with Israel because, like Israel, we've been in a drought for decades. And I mean, Israel much longer, I think. But
yes.
Israel is net positive on water. We have been struggling to manage water in California. So the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has a number of water tech contracts that it has. Not to mention the medical tech, the tech. I mean, like let's go down the list of what Israel contributes to America, and the list is endless. And people want to deny that, and all they look at is this number, 3 billion. But if you look at the return on investment, it's probably the single best America first investment that we make.
100%. Any other nation that I look at that the United States has as either an ally or that America gives funding to for U.S. interests,
Mm-hmm.
what I've noticed is that usually it's not the American people per se that make profit from those tax-paying dollars that go to those nations. One of them, let's say Ukraine, if we want to talk about a hot topic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, let's ask ourselves honestly, how, first of all, Ukraine has received way more billions of dollars than has gone in towards Israel during this current war that Israel's had, which, to be fair for the audience, there has been a peak from that typical $3 billion a year into the
Yeah.
military industry here. So it has gone up because of the war that we've been in. But again, the Ukraine war dwarfs what's gone towards Israel.
Right.
And again, I'm asking myself, as a Israeli slash American family descendant, um, what does it give back to the American people, the Ukrainian supporting the Ukrainians, besides having a bigger beef with your great nemesis, Russia, so to speak, right?
Right.
Um, and then again, just look at every other nation, and I think that makes your point that you made, and it's the point that I make actually quite often as well, is that ignorance of people with the America First worldview.
Mm.
And by the way, um, for those who want to be an island to themselves, then I say, no problem. You want to be America first hardcore, get rid of the Israeli cell phones that you're using, get rid of the Israeli tech that you're using, and pull that life-saving tech that's inside your grandma, keeping her alive right now. Just chuck it, get rid of it. Put something
Mm.
American in there that wasn't developed in Israel.
Yeah.
Um, and like, if you want to be real hardcore, then be real hardcore. Quit playing as if you're a social justice warrior, individual, whatever, right? Just like with the Greta Thunbergs, that takes her private yacht across the ocean that burns way more fuel than if she would have just taken that freaking flight and took one seat on that flight to get to wherever she wanted to. Like, quit being hypocrites is what I'm saying in your so-called causes. and just recognize the hypocrisy, the stupidity behind what you're saying. And and by the way, get rid of your expensive Nike shoes, which you think are expensive. There actually should be about 3 times the price, if not more, if they were literally made in America, right?
Right. Sure.
That's how it works. Import, export. America's not an island to itself.
Sure.
That's how the world works. Same with Israel, right? We have import, export deals with all kinds of countries,
Mm-hmm.
and even countries we don't like. But that's the way the world revolves. That's the
Sure.
reality, you know?
Sure. And another thing I do want to add that is so important is that Israel is not only America's staunchest ally. People always say, oh, they're our most strategic ally in the Middle East. No, they're actually our most strategic ally, hard stop. Okay.
Yeah.
But the Middle East happens to be the world's most volatile region. And it does affect the whole world, not just because of oil, but because of terror, right?
Yep.
Terror that starts in the Middle East doesn't end in the Middle East. But there's Israel, this tiny, tiny, tiny little country in the middle of it all that provides America with strategic positioning, right? That we know that Israel is always on our side, okay? You can say what you want about the Saudis or Qatar or Jordan or the good
Turkey.
actors in the region. Yeah, Turkey. None of these people is a true ally of America. They may be at times a transactional ally of America, but they're not somebody that we could depend on. We could depend on Israel strategically and diplomatically when it comes to the United Nations. Israel is always supporting America. And in this day and age, when the United Nations is more and more hijacked by terrorists and by dictators, these funds, these real funds, become more and more valuable. There is a true concept of America first. I get it, but we cannot be America only. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And mind you, I'm an Israeli patriot, but I'm also an American patriot to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
From afar. Because I mean, I can't really say I'm altruistically American patriot if I don't live in America, full time, right? But the point is, I have family in the United States. I have my personal interests for the United States that are personal. They're not just an idea. So if I'm looking at political issues like we were just talking on, when it comes to Israel, United States, then I can't just completely write off the United States and say, well, I could care less what happens to America. It can burn and whatever and blah, blah. Who cares? I do care. And like you said, Israel is a real, hard, true ally. And besides all the points that we just made, and I think this is one of the main points I think is rarely talked about, is the main reason that America and Israel have a, how would you say, a worldview that is important, that we're protecting and we're guarding. It's the Judeo-Christian values.
Exactly.
Right? So Israel is the center, the navel of these two monotheistic religions that have impacted the rest of the world, that have transformed the rest of the world. Americans, Europeans would still be praying to rocks if you didn't have the Torah that came to you, right, through Jesus and his disciples and the creation of the Christian faith that exported the Judeo values of the Torah, right? And that became the backbone for most European countries of today, which then of the immigrants that moved to the United States, that became the backbone of the United States Constitution and everything America's founded on. It is biblical values. And what people don't seem to understand, at least they're too ignorant to want to understand, or I don't know how you want to look at it, is that they excuse and give Islam a hard pass when they claim what they claim, and that they're all about basically targeting the Jew and the Christian.
Right.
So for those who think I'm, full of nonsense, here's a book, for example, that I've been researching and reading as one of the key, well, I don't know if you can read it very well, but in any case, it's Inside Jihad, Understanding and Confronting Radical Islam by Dr. Tawfiq Hamid, who is an Egyptian who actually got recruited to be part of one of the terrorist organizations. I think it's like similar to the Muslim Brotherhood equivalent. So he will tell you, and he's giving you Quranic quotes about how basically the Islamic worldview is very much not just, oh, we disagree. No, it's to get rid of the Jew and Christian beliefs once and for all if they don't convert. Okay. So this is what we're up against. And that's just to kind of re-emphasize your point. Israel's on the forefront of the threat to the West because of that. Because here in the Middle East, it has been conquered by Islam since the time of Muhammad and his armies. Those are the real colonizers. Those are the real trying to displace the original people groups that lived here, and so on and so forth. But instead, the morons of the world want to blame me, and want to blame Christians and whatever. But that's the reality. It's a religious war, and you can't ignore that. What do you want to say about that hot topic?
Well, first of all, let's work backwards for a moment here, because when you say colonizers, I'm going to go back again to the Douglas Murray quote. Tell me what you accuse the Jews of, and I'll tell you what. I mean, look at Al-Aqsa Mosque. You want probably the world's most prominent example of colonialism. Mm-hmm. Al-Aqsa Mosque, for anyone who doesn't know, is built on the ruins of the Second Temple, the single holiest site in all of Judaism, was destroyed by invaders, and Al-Aqsa Mosque is built on top of it. So the colonialist, and by the way, just like we always say, if we're genociders, we're really bad at genocide because their population just keeps increasing year after year. Correct. But if we're colonizers, we're also really bad colonizers. You look at a map of the Middle East, you can't even find Israel on it. It's so small. People don't understand. Did you see the other day, Doron, when Joe Rogan, when they asked him how many Jews he thought there were in the world, and he said, I don't know, half, 30%. It's we're 0.02% of the world. But I mean, here's a guy who has been platforming. He tries to platform everyone, quote unquote, and give everyone a fair shake. But he's platforming some of the world's biggest anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic voices. And he thinks that 30 or 40% of the world is Jewish when we're 0.02%. Is this colonize, yes, we've taken over the world. No, we just want this tiny corner of the world that, if you look at the Israeli Declaration of Independence, because there is no constitution, literally, it's just we just want to live in peace. We just want a corner of the world where we can be safe and we can be Jewish. Is that too much to ask? The answer of the world is, well, yeah, that's too much to ask. Correct. But the one, what I wanted to mention about the Judeo-Christian values, and this is one of the most disturbing trends, and I took this up with Thane Rosenbaum on my show, and it really blew up, because this was just a day after the Turning Point event at Ole Miss. I don't know if you watched it, but it was a balagan. The whole thing, keep in mind, Turning Point is under Charlie Kirk was a very Zionistic and very pro-Judeo-Christian values, right? Now, what I see coming out of Turning Point right now is the refutation of the Judeo part, and now it's just Christian values. Now, I don't want to impose who I am on who they are, but Christian values are not the same as Judeo-Christian values. Judeo-Christian values is understanding that Christianity is a superset of Judaism, meaning that all things Jewish, the Torah, the Tanakh, are part of the Christian liturgy as well. It's just that Christianity expands beyond that. The new turning point, they are literally trying to repudiate, whether in word or literally to rewrite the thought that there is no Christianity without Judaism. I will repeat that, not just as a Jew, but as a historian. There is no Christianity without Judaism. Jesus
Correct.
was a Jew. He died a Jew. He was a Jew until the last, okay? People decided that they wanted to create Christianity in his honor, in his memory, in his whatever, in his name. But to deny the Jewish aspect of Christianity is to deny Christianity itself. Now, what happened at this turning point event at Ole Miss was, it sounds like they were, from what I heard after, but I didn't know this because the day after, that they were like Groyper plants. But the people who were asking questions were asking brutally anti-Semitic questions. Not just anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. And they were taking out the blood libels and they were putting them into these innocuous questions, right? Yeah. And so I find this to be one of the most dangerous parts of the far right, is trying to decouple the Jews from the Christians, because let's go back to what you're saying. What is the goal of jihad? It is to destroy the infidels. Who are the infidels? Well, primarily they're the Jews and the Christians. Well, let's go back to how many Jews are there in the world? 15 million approximately. 20 million on a good day if you count the Jews who don't think they're Jews and only have one parent who's the father, who, whatever. Okay, fine. Let's say there's 20 million out of 8 billion people are Jews. So how do we destroy the infidels? Well, let's start with the low-hanging fruit. The Jews are easy. We're easy. The problem is we have God on our side. Exactly. I don't just say that from religion. Israel is a miracle. The Jewish people, our existence is a miracle. It's nothing short of a miracle. But how about this? How about if, as jihadis, we don't just destroy the Jews, but we also turn the Christians against the Jews? Because once the Jews are gone, now we can focus on, the bigger target, the real prize, which is the Christian people. And so it's these wedge issues, and it's like, okay, let's cut off this segment of the population. Let's cut off this segment of the population. Let's cut off this segment of the population until everyone's cut off and jihad wins.
Exactly. And, and so just again, like, not to take my word for it, right? But we find here in the Quran 5:51, O ye who believe, take not the Jews and the Christians for your friends and protectors. They are but friends and protectors to each other. And he amongst you that turns to them for friendship is of them. Verily Allah guideth not a people unjust. So get what this is from the Quran. This is what it's saying. So it's basically saying the Jews and the Christians are one and the same, and they're for each other. And like you pointed out, that's what they're doing. They're trying to put this wedge, because it's ultimately these attacks, if you like, when you really research and get to the core of it, it's coming from jihadists who have lots of money and influence and power, and they're using dawah. That's right, dawah, to promote jihadist agenda in the West, which is the soft jihad that you just don't even recognize. You've been attacked, and war's been declared on you, and it's perfect. And like you said, and so these people are going to come and they're going to start believing all this crap, but really they've been fed this diet of misinformation and lies to create that wedge, because they don't want the Jews and the Christians to stand together, because they know that's our strength, because they recognize, at least Muhammad recognized, or whoever wrote this on behalf of Muhammad, however you want to look at it, that it was that unity that was what made us strong against Islam, trying to supersede and say, no, we're the real, true, and final religion, right? Because that's essentially what it is. And it just continues with I'll just, I don't want to give too many quotes here, but for example, those who say that God is is Christ, the son of Mary, are infidels. That's Quran 5:17, right? So again, direct quotes, directly
Right.
cutting towards Christians who believe that Jesus is the Messiah and the Son of God and Son of Mary, or son of a virgin in specific, right? It's targeting them, and it says non-believers are to be offered three options. This is essentially what they believe. If you're going to be really true to the
Mm-hmm.
Islamic worldview, for the non-believers, it's either to convert to Islam, pay the jizya, humiliation, taxes. There's all kinds of ways that works, by the way, or be slain.
Right.
This is coming from a Muslim. This is coming from a Muslim, actually a very well learned Muslim. We're not talking about some ignorant guy. He actually studied Islam as one of his main passions, and that's really what we're up against. And I think people need to wake up. They need to realize, this isn't about Israel. This isn't about America first. This is about a globalist agenda. And the ones who are actually talking about it so boldly and openly, like we just did in this conversation, are actually the
Mm-hmm.
European politicians who are labeled as the far right because they're sick and tired of seeing these fake immigrants that came in, not for asylum, but to take over and bringing violence and rape and crime that has gone up to where over 90% of the crime is done by solely Muslim immigrants, with a clear agenda to take over and to humiliate, to do the jizya, to do all these things, because in their minds, this is what they're doing. And we are living kind of like in a utopic idea, like you said, for us to just have water balloons, but you're actually believing that that's the reality. You know what I mean? It's not just a hopeful
Yep.
thought. And that's the crazy thing, is you're taking your hopeful thought and saying nobody would ever believe that. Nobody would actually say that,
Right.
and it's like, you know what? I wish we lived in a world where, yes, we didn't have guns and we didn't have militaries and we didn't have wars. Trust me, I hate war more than anybody else. Um, but that's the reality we're up against, and we need to get together. And I think that's the beautiful thing that I've been able to see with you, and the work we've worked together to help our Christian community here and to help collaborate between the Jewish and Christian communities also abroad for the common good, because we do have shared values. We have the Torah as our foundational biblical principle, human values that we contribute to the world, and we need to fight for that just as wholeheartedly as they are fighting for their false narrative and trying to displace and do away with our true faith. Because I'm sorry, but we came first. And if you want to come and say that you're a Joseph good guy or whatever it's called, the guy from the Mormons or whatever, and I found some new revelation out, it just happened to be me. You got to take my word for it here in this cave, and I met with this angel, and just take my word for it. Like, sorry guys, like, enough. We need to fight for the truth. We know the truth is on our side. We know that biblical, Judeo-biblical values have reshaped the world for the good and for the positive. That's why we have the legal age for drinking. That's why we have the legal age and fighting against human trafficking and all this. These were Christian causes that were fighting for human rights. I don't see the Muslims doing that. I'm sorry. And Muslims, good friends of mine who know this, they are going to critique their own community, and they're saying, you're right. We are trying to fight to reform our values because that doesn't match up with human values, human rights values. That's, and I know it hurts for some people to hear that, but it's the truth.
Well, let's go beyond that, Doron. All Western law comes from Judeo-Christian values. First of all, it starts with the golden rule, which sounds like this fun thing that you might hear in a children's fairy tale. The golden rule comes from the Torah, right? Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. This is a biblical, so you could say Judeo-Christian, it comes from the Torah, but this is a biblical concept. I know it's repeated in the Christian Bible, but that is where it originated. And we have the 10 Commandments, which basically is the basis of almost all law. Now, people could argue, yeah, but if you really look at the Torah, it also talks about like an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, but what are we actually acting upon? We take the 10 commandments: do not kill, do not cheat, do not lie, do not, right? So this is like the basis of Western civilization. This is not a fundamentalist practice. Another thing that I want to bring up, because what you're focusing on, which we all focus so much on, is the military jihad. But people have to understand that there are much more subversive, in not just in theory, in writing. Elements of the Islamic jihad are the political and the population, the demographic jihad. Now, you alluded to it when you said, oh, we know that they come to the Western world and they don't adopt Western values, but you know what they do? They have 10 children. And so that is how, in a democracy, you can take over a democracy without force, just through population. This is why the whatever, I'm going to say Palestinians because I don't have another word for the Arabs in the region of the Palestinian territories, are fighting so hard for the right of return, because they know that if they flood Israel with 4 or 5 million Muslims, and they each have, 2 or 3 babies, then Israel is no longer a Jewish state. The same thing is happening in the West. We're seeing this in Europe, particularly, where we're seeing majority Muslim cities now, and we're seeing that they are dumpster fires of like unmitigated violence and hatred. And that is the demographic war. But particularly here in America, I mean, I know you watched it, everybody watched it, but this election of Zohran Mamdani in New York, now we're seeing the political jihad. I mean, we already saw it in London, in Birmingham, all over England, and in various cities in Europe, and in smaller cities here in America. But we saw it, we see it in our Congress with Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And what happens is that, you say that, like, people, I sometimes I laugh at inappropriate times, because it's what I call hashtag funny, not funny. Like, you're like, people are like, oh no, they would never say stuff like that. I'm like, guys, they're saying it out loud. Like you don't have to doubt whether they're saying this. It's all over the internet. They post it. Their imams are calling for the death of the West. Their imams are calling for the death of the Jews. Their conventions are saying, we're going to put Mamdani in there. We are going to pay for his, when Linda Sarsour, or I think it was, who said, was it Sarsour, who said, oh, by the way, we funded his whole campaign, and it was through basically CARE. And they're like, and we have 10,000 more of him waiting. I mean, I'm waiting for the one that comes to Los Angeles. It can't be far off. I would imagine it will be in the next 1 to 5 years that we'll see the new Mamdani in LA, which hopefully will be the nail in my American coffin that finally gets me to Israel. I really want to make Aliyah, and I'm working on it. But so we have to understand that
doesn't give much hope for Americans, though, right?
For whom?
For Americans, that doesn't give much hope for Americans, right? And that's the benefit that the Jewish world has, is that you have an Israel to fall back on, so to speak. And the real question is, what about those who don't have that?
Doron, my whole life, I up until October 7th, I knew that Jews needed Israel, but I never understood why. Yeah. It's crystal clear now. I mean, it's crystal clear. I don't think there'll be any Jews left in the West within 10 years. But, 10 years may sound like a long time. That's a blink of an eye. It's going to be, like you say, it's going to be convert or die. There's not going to be, any tax that we're going to be able to pay to get out of this. Look at what's going on. I mean, there are people calling for our death and killing us in the streets, and nobody's doing anything about it all across the globe. We're looking at, people are like, oh, it's like the Holocaust all over again. I'm like, this is Nazi Europe on steroids, because at least
Yes.
then it was contained. Right now, we're seeing the same exact patterns, the same exact actions, the same rhetoric, the same propaganda all over the world, right? And it could
Yes.
seem that you could say America is not far behind, but look at what's happening already on our campuses and in our schools. We're already there. And these are our next generation of leaders. So what's
Yeah,
left?
the huge difference is that this generation have lessons learned from the Holocaust. That's
Exactly.
the sad reality. You know that this happened before, or you should know, and you should know that you shouldn't be making the same statements and ranting as these Nazi anti-Semite psychopaths. And apparently, you don't seem to see the parallel. That's what blows me away. Like, are you for real? Are you for real? Are you that ignorant? You know?
Yep, it's true. In Nazi Germany, there was no, there was no like pretext. Like nobody had any idea what was happening to them because it snuck up on them. I mean, there have been numerous experiments where they've pulled off the same um, they've been benevolent experiments. Like nobody was killed in the making of this experiment, but to see if they could turn a whole population, and they work every single time. Our minds are malleable, and
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of a very, very small percentage of very hard-headed people like you and I,
Yeah.
people generally can be swayed to just about any sort of narrative without questioning, like, wait, what? Like why would I go along with that? And yeah, I hate using the word context after the whole, debacle in Congress with the presidents and of the universities. Yeah, it's like, do we have no historical context? Because back then they didn't. As far as we know, it was the first major time that like brainwashing on a massive scale had taken place. But I feel like, Doron, I feel like we're living in a zombie apocalypse, and I say it with a smile, but I actually do.
Yeah. It really feels like that. And but again, that's why hopefully people understand that that's why they should follow you. They should listen to your content. They should get educated and realize, like, look, there are people out there who are going to speak the truth. You're not by yourself. There's plenty of us out here trying to shine a light in this darkness,
Yeah.
and you just got to be searching for it, and you got to be using your critical common sense thinking to see that, wait, something's wrong here. Why are we hating on a people group in with the cause of human rights? Okay, human rights except for Jewish human rights, right? Or Israelis, because it's not the same. I'm not anti-Jewish. I'm
Yeah.
just anti-Israeli. It's like,
Sure.
are you listening to yourself? You know what I mean? Um, uh, Even for me, right, who's had to unfortunately fight a people, right, and see them as an enemy. I don't hate them. I hate the ideology. I hate what they've created for themselves. I hate the evil. But the people,
Right.
I'm wanting for them to be liberated from their bondage of the death cult, and for them to live their lives freely and raise their kids with hope and all of that, and quit stealing their children's childhood with just this insanity. That's what I wish. And you know that's my hope, is that people are going to see the truth and that the truth is going to prevail. The only question is, how many of you are going to fall prey to this incitement and evil, and be ashamed of yourself on the day after? Because let me tell you, it wasn't a great thing to be a Nazi when the war was over. Nobody was proud of being part of the SAS, or sorry, the SS.
Yeah.
You know, that's my
Well,
hope, is that there's going to be less of these people that are going to be like, how did I fall for this?
the suicidal empathy that we're seeing, which is
Hmm.
rooting for the guy who wants to kill you, is an outshoot of a far left segment of the population that has been programmed to hate no one and accept everyone. Here's the irony. Because they want to hate no one, they're willing to love the people who want to kill them. And yet, not only, I think that the piece that so many people are missing in their dialogue that is so unique about what's going on with the Jew hatred that's going on now is that it's not just an undercurrent. It's not even just a thing that's happening. It's a thing that hundreds of thousands of people are marching all over the world. And it is not just hate, but it is genocidal. We're talking about people who have been trained to accept all, and they are not just hating the Jews because we dared to be slaughtered on 10/7, but they are calling for our death. It's not even, there's no parity there with anything that we've ever seen before. So, yeah. But the other thing is that yes, we're on the right side of history. I agree with you, Doron. The difference is, look at our historians. Okay, so right now our history is being written by historical revisionists who are erasing Jews from the Holocaust. Okay, they're erasing Hamas from the war in Gaza. They're erasing all context. So that all it is let's take the parts that make Jews the evil ones, and we are going to call this history. This is what I worry about. There was a time when history and news were objective. That time is way gone behind us. And this denialism that started taking root within hours of the actual attacks on October 7th and is now so deeply entrenched in certain segments, even of the academic community, worries me about, is anybody going to be ashamed that they march for Hamas? Because that is going to require an awakening, and it's going to require truth in a world that is overwhelmed with lies and propaganda. How's that for a positive note?
Yeah. Well, it's, you know what? Again, it shows all the more so why you have to be courageous for the truth, because it's not going to be easy. There's going to be so much more obstacles put in front of us, not to mention the younger generation, like you're pointing out. That's the future they're going to be raised in, with these revisionist historians claiming that Churchill drug England into a war that they didn't have to fight, instead of the actual historic reality that no, he was the hero of Great Britain, because the prime minister, who was the standing prime minister, was a total spineless loser that failed and got sucked into having to defend England, right? And so Churchill had to take his place. I mean, literally had to, right? I mean, it was like he stood up to the plate and took upon himself to defend England against the Nazis. And to say he's a war criminal and whatever, it's like these people live in, I don't know what kind of rock they live under. If you know, have you read any historic record? Have you, like, do you actually study history? You know, and yeah, it's insane that, yeah, you're right. It's something to ponder. But that's also, again, if you're a parent, here's my tidbit to you. This is what I do. I homeschool, because I don't trust the schooling systems, not of Israel, not of anybody's, for this very reason. Because already when I was a kid, I noticed certain trends in the school system that were bothersome. As a teenager, I noticed it. And I was like, look, this is crazy. And thankfully, I'm able to do it. It doesn't mean everybody's privileged and able to do it. Trust me, I'm not like, you know, privileged as in financially. It is a sacrifice. My wife not working. She's the main educator in our homeschooling system that we have. But it's protecting our children's future, their minds, their individuality, who, you know, making them into contributing. How do you call it? Contributing citizens to society, or whatever you want to call it, not being a bunch of morons, you know. And that's what I'm seeing in the school systems. You're right. It's troublesome. They're raising up ignorant people who can't do nothing. You know, like, for example, change the oil in your car. How many kids today can do that? Something basic. And that's something my kids are going to know how to do, right?
I can't do
Um,
that.
and I'm very curious, but I'm very curious how many of their peers are going to be able to do simple things like that that used to be commonplace in many American homes, for example. It's not common in
Yeah.
Israel at all, by the way. But that's something I've learned from my American friends that taught me that, because until I went to college in the States, I didn't know how to change my oil as an
Yeah.
adult. But I learned it from my buddies, and they're like, "Oh, it's simple." And when I saw that, I'll go, "Dang, it is simple! Like, how did I not know this?" Um, and
Okay,
so,
next time I'm in Israel, you're gonna have to teach me how to change oil.
copy that. So, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
personal responsibility is all I'm saying, right? It's
Yep.
personal responsibility. It goes back to what I said, they can search out the truth. It's out there. There's people like you, myself, and others. We're providing you with real, true stories, narrative, not propaganda. And if you want to believe your propaganda and you're comfortable in there, hey, knock yourself out. But if you care about truth, you're going to have to fight to get to the truth. It's going to be an effort. Don't be lazy. Don't just expect to open up Chat GPT. Tell me X, Y, Z. Chat GPT doesn't know jack.
Amen. I think you need to start making t-shirts that say, "Don't be a moron." Says Doron. The Doron part came after. I just realized that it rhymes. There's not a lot that rhymes with moron or Doron, but they rhyme with each other.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, maybe I should make that a podcast special.
Don't be a moron. But that's what it all comes down to. Honestly, if
Yeah.
anybody is willing to stick with their morals and get away from the mental laziness that has taken over the world, we will find truth. And in truth is goodness. And we have to just stay strong in this fight of good versus evil. Hard stop.
Exactly. Shana, thank you so much for this wonderful interview. It's been fun to hear your insights that are so unique and so different, again, than the way I grew up or my experiences and my world that I grew up in. And I think hopefully this is going to bring some clarity to a lot of people out there, that not all pro-Zionist, pro-Israel, pro-life, pro-God individuals are these hardcore settler or whatever Bible thumping freaks out there that people kind of have in their mind, and that you have a different, how to say, flavor of that yeah, oh, okay, so there's other people like this. They're not all like stereotypical like we think. It's like, yeah, no, we're not all stereotypical in how the media portrays or whatever. And that, no, being a Zionist isn't a bad word, and being pro-Israel isn't a bad thing. And saying Am Yisrael Chai, which I love the way you put it, that it's about being for life, and that is so beautiful, because that's really, I think, what we all are, irregardless of how the media wants to paint us and portray us. And that we are multicolored, multiracial, multi-background, and we're all striving for the same thing. Quit trying to clump us into this camp that, oh, we don't all click together. It's like, no, there's a lot more that we have, and there's many more of us, and many more facets of us out there. And I just appreciate your worldview and what you bring to the table here. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much. And I do want to add that we are all Am Yisrael, even if you live in Los Angeles or Johannesburg or London. Am Yisrael is a nation. It's not just Eretz Yisrael, right? So I hope one day that we all will be together, celebrating our bold and our proud Judaism in the land of Israel. But in the meantime, I do want to emphasize, as a proud member of the diaspora, that we are Am Yisrael, and we need to always defend our nation.
Beautiful. Folks, if you like this podcast interview, make sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And most importantly, share it. Share this message with other people, with friends. Just like Shana was saying, she's had lots of friends that, either just don't want to have the conversation or whatever. And there are plenty of friends that you have as well that might be like that. So instead of trying to get into an argument with them about whatever, the subject on Israel, etc., you can share this conversation. This is a good conversation. It's civil. We were able to control ourselves during this conversation, I think, for the most part, except for the T-shirt that I'll be, the offensive T-shirt that I'll be probably making prints of. But these are contents that you can share. Again, go to Shana's social links. They're going to be at the bottom of the YouTube here in the description. Please make sure to check that out. Go to her content, and then again, share her information that you find valuable, that you enjoyed, that was impactful to you. Share it, because otherwise it's not going to get out there to other people. You have to get the message out. And besides that, with all that said, you all have a wonderful, blessed week, and shalom from Israel.
Shalom. Thank you so much from Los Angeles. Doron Keidar.
Amen.